Hello, welcome to this channel, Runaway Germ. I'm Shayna, and I mostly make content about autism. And today this video was kind of inspired by a lot of the comments that I receive on this channel. A lot of people I find are trying to figure out if they are autistic or not. And I think that a lot of videos like mine, like other people's channels, really help people. I know that when I was trying to figure out if I was autistic or not, I went to YouTube to try to figure this stuff out. And so today's video is 30 signs that you or possibly someone you know may be autistic. A big disclaimer, I am not licensed. I'm just somebody with autism. I'm not trying to say that this video is supplemental to any professional help you receive. I'm not trying to say that what I'm about to tell you is like law or for sure fact, this or that. It is simply just personal observations and personal experiences that I'm drawing from in this video. So this is, again, I cannot stress this enough. This is not supplemental for if these things apply to you, you are now diagnosed. This is not supplemental for professional help. I'm not trying to get in the way of any of that. I'm just trying to make a more condensed video for the people that comment that think they might be autistic, might not. This might kind of help you maybe bring up some different points that you might have not known, because obviously there are a lot of tests online. So I just kind of wanted to collect more of just the little things that when I'm kind of observing somebody and wondering if they could possibly be on the spectrum, these are just kind of the things that I look at. These are the kind of things that if I see, they might spark something like, I wonder, you know. I'm never trying to go around being like, I know you're autistic, I know this or that. No, it's nothing of that. It's just coming from a curious place. Also, at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about BLUSHBERRY lashes. Those are the magnetic lashes that I'm wearing today. They kindly gifted them to me, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about them at the end. Okay, so number one has to do with speech. A lot of these ones that I'm going to start off with have to do with speech patterns and how people on the spectrum conduct themselves in conversations, because of the fact that that's kind of the most external component of autism. It's something that can a little bit be more observed from somebody a little bit farther away from them, you know. These are even things that you can spot from people like on reality TV, stuff like that. Whereas like there are some other ones that are so much more specific that you wouldn't know unless you like literally followed this person around or was like inside of their brain. So also, another disclaimer is, like, these 30 things that I'm listing, not all of them apply to me. You can be on the spectrum and not all of them can apply to you, but probably an overwhelming majority will. And again, this is not law, this is just my experience, my observations. I'm an astrologer, I love observing people, it's literally what I do, so speech. Doesn't speak much when young or takes a while to learn how to talk. May even stop talking and then start again, or just point to things. Wanting to point to things all the time instead of talking is a very common thing. This is something you'd have to ask your parents or whoever was your guardian when you were young. But it's, I think, one of the main telltale external signs that somebody might be autistic that'll show up when they're around like 1 to 5. Number two is something that everybody will say, but I don't like how it's framed, and that's eye contact. Yes, we all know that people on the spectrum don't make eye contact with people. Like, that is something that it's like beat over the head, but I think that it's being poorly described because it's much, much, much more specific than that. Because people on the spectrum will make eye contact with you, but it's all about observing what their eyes are doing when they're talking to you. A lot of people will even mention in these videos, or probably if you just are watching this video, you can even see like kind of my camera would be my eye contact. And I always come back to it, but a lot of times I'm racing between different sides. You know, my eyes are going over here, over there, like constantly looking around, like very restless, searching. They're just the way that eyes move when people that are on the spectrum have a conversation with somebody. And again, like a lot of times you'll see people on the spectrum make eye contact with somebody, but it's not going to be held and strong. It can often look more like rapid eye and even face movements. So yeah, they'll just kind of go back and forth between, you know, eye contact, pieces around your face, over there, up, down, look, that. And that I think also goes into why people misidentify people on the spectrum's body movement and eye contact, because you know, there's that thing of like, oh, if you look up and right, you're lying. I don't think that's the actual one, but like, oh, if you're doing that, you're lying. But people on the spectrum are going to be looking around so much that they can be telling the truth and they can look up and you know what I mean? So that's kind of where that doesn't really have much to do with anything. Like Amanda Knox, I've always wondered if like autistic? I don't know. If you know that story and how everyone took that interview. Number 3 is when people on the spectrum are talking, a lot of times there's just general body stiffness, like they almost don't really fit right in their body, or they just don't really know what to do with it. And that's only going to get more exaggerated the more eyes that are on them. Number 4 is fidgeting constantly, not being able to stay still, can't get comfortable, sitting weirdly, moving around, going up and down, just being anxious within their body. I think is a very common thing. You know, again, going back to that awkwardness in the world, this is also known as stims. A stim is basically a repetitive movement that helps somebody concentrate or focus. Like I'll play with my nail ridges, scratches, hair movements, hair twists, fingers, hands, toes, whatever it might be. If you don't know what it is kind of on the outside, it'll just look like fidgeting. Number 5 is when speaking, sentences will run into each other. You can probably even see that in the way that I'm conducting myself in this video right now. But each line will be delivered with the same intensity, and a lot of stories will be told in a very fumbling and stiff manner. Like, it's a godsend that I can edit these videos, because if I couldn't, it's just embarrassing how much dumb stuff I edit out and how many times I repeat and say the same thing over and over, and how just aggressive my vocal tone can even be sometimes. Like, when I was a kid, I was terrible at telling stories, and I would always have all my other friends tell the stories for me, because I just knew that I just couldn't build suspense, I couldn't build emotion, I couldn't, I didn't understand how to tell the story in an interesting way. And I would also like focus in on the most unimportant details and like hash those out very specifically, and then just totally skip over like the main part of the story and like not be sure what to exaggerate. So yeah, a lot of times people on the spectrum aren't very good storytellers, and that kind of goes into the next one, which is number 6. They can have a lot of trouble with back and forth and even conversations. So what I mean by that is a lot of times you'll catch somebody on the spectrum either taking over the conversation and kind of just soliloquying practically to just a bunch of people, and telling a story in a very monotone way and going on and on, or you'll catch them feeling very self-conscious and not sure what to add or input at all, and so they don't really say anything or add to whatever's going on at all. And it's not because they don't know or don't have anything to say. It's mostly coming from having a big problem knowing when to interrupt people, when to chime in, when to say something. I think is a lot of times what's holding people on the spectrum back, and that's what keeps also people on the spectrum talking for so long, is because just like when they don't know how to interrupt, they also don't know when to stop. And so it can just be hard to read, because they'll be like, oh, nobody's stopping me, so I must need to keep talking, and almost feel sometimes an obligation to keep talking because nobody's stopping me. And this is just a big disclaimer. I know a lot of these are kind of maybe harsher or more negative, and I'm not making this list to like point a finger at people on the spectrum, because like I said, I pretty much do all of these things, but more to just be like, do you do this and you don't know why? This might be why, it's coming from that place, coming from a place of information. I'm not at all trying to judge people. I'm not trying to make you feel bad for doing these things by any stretch of the imagination. I'm really just trying to put out awareness and possibly validation as well. That's where this is coming from. So I don't want it to be taken the wrong way at all. I love my autism. If you know anything about me, I love it. I tried to make these all kind of go into one another. So number 7 also has to do with number 6. When I was talking about people on the spectrum not really chiming in at all during a conversation, it could also just have to do with they're not interested. They don't care, and they've done what I call is the tune out phase. I do this all the time. My old roommate kind of pinned this. She would kind of spot me a lot of times in group conversations. I'd be in it, I'd be focused, I'd be adding, I'd be interested, and then there's just a moment where I click off and I don't care anymore, and the conversation has gone on for too long, and I'm out of there, and it kind of looks like I just kind of like creeped out of my body and was like, time to go into my own world now, And so yeah, once you've lost somebody on the spectrum's attention, you've lost it, they're gone, like next. Number 8, people on the spectrum are extremely knowledgeable, especially about very specific topics. This is also called having a special interest. Special interests, I think, is one of the main things of being on the spectrum. Something that you just absolutely love, pour your heart and soul into, and a lot of times it's something that's a little bit more niche, or it doesn't really matter about the external view of it. It's just what they have that passion for and that's driving them, and very self-motivated in learning about this interest, and can be, just like I said, I cannot stress this enough, so extraordinarily knowledgeable about it. They really know every in and out of it. But on the other end of that, they can also just be, like I mentioned, so disinterested and unaware of other things. Number 9, overstating their very strong and pungent opinions without realizing that they're kind of doing so. Especially with emphasis on without realizing that they are such polarizing opinions. This can create kind of a I can't think of the word, a hedge in relationships and conversations, because that kind of goes into another thing of, it's a black and white mind, basically. It can be very much that way. Number 10, people on the spectrum are usually not very sneaky. Not that nobody on the spectrum has ever lied. I mean, what do you think masking is? But they'll just overshare private information that they don't realize is private information because it wasn't specified, and they don't have the understanding of just the gut understanding of what you'd share about somebody and what you don't. I know that I have done this so many times, and I have really messed up a lot of things with friendships or this or that because I have completely just overshared a secret, and it's not a good thing to do. So that's a pretty common thing. Just really not sneaky in that way. Or even possibly oversharing information about themselves, and just not understanding that people weaponize that stuff too, because they don't get why anybody would, because they're fine with it. Number 11 is never one to push small talk for the sake of small talk. And this also has to do with those little formalities of saying hello, saying goodbye. I honestly think that people on the spectrum are pretty good at hellos, because they're not like tired and they're fine. It's new, it's fresh. They can do hellos. I think that we're all especially bad at goodbyes. It's just really awkward to know when to leave, how to leave, and then people make a deal out of it. And then like there's so much more mental stuff that goes into how to politely leave and how to say goodbye. And it's just like, why are we going through all this? And now I feel obligated to say this stuff. So yeah, just normally like a lot of times if you say goodbye to them, just kind of be like bye and then they leave. Or just so like, I've left so many things before without ever saying goodbye, that kind of stuff. This kind of goes into like maybe not wanting a hug, not liking being touched is also a very common thing. Number 12, totally misunderstanding people's intentions, especially emotional intent behind what the other person is saying. In a smaller way, if you notice somebody not really understanding why movie characters do the things that they do, totally misunderstanding intentions in that way, that could be a big sign that somebody is on the spectrum. This obviously can really affect friendships just because they can have a lot of trouble understanding where the other person is coming from and only understand where they're coming from, and so expect the other people to come from where they're coming from and get very confused. And that kind of goes into number 13, which is speaking with such a strong, sure sense of assuredness. That was a silly sentence, but you know what I mean. Just a lot of conviction. And again, that kind of goes back to not realizing that the opinions that they're sharing are strong. They're also speaking on those opinions in a very convicting way. Yeah, people on the spectrum can just be very unwavering in their point of view, their perspective, and they have a lot of trouble comprehending other people's perspectives as they think their way is the right way, and it can be very black and white thinking, and it can be really hard to break somebody out of that kind of way with autism. Once they're introduced to something, the way they're introduced to it, the way they're told about it, they can really latch onto that and see that as correct and not understand that, just not understand those gray areas sometimes. And that goes into number 14, which is black and white thinking with rules. These people can overly follow the rules, especially when they're young. Even if they do then understand when they're older, like, oh, like there are some rules that are meant to be broken and that's okay. When they try to execute those breaking or bending of the rules, it just doesn't come out in the right way. They don't understand what the rules are to break, how to bend them, how to go about bending them, kind of going back to that having trouble being sneaky thing, and kind of also overexerting themselves kind of thing. And just in general, people on the spectrum live by very strong morals, and this can be a very positive thing because, like, I'm just using this as an example. I've been vegan for 4 years. I'm not bringing this up to force everybody to my mind, but that is something that I live by very strongly, and I've had no problem these 4 years sticking to it. And there was a time especially that I didn't understand how and why people couldn't stick to it, because I could stick to it with such ease and can still stick to being vegan with such ease. And so I really had to learn that people are different and people need something different and need a different transition, you know what I mean, and need more leverage with that kind of stuff. And so that was something that just in general I've always had a lot of problems with, but that was just a good kind of example. So yeah, I mean, on a smaller sense, especially when they're young, they can kind of come across as narcs or tattletales without meaning to, but as just as much as they're narcs and tattletales, they're also probably getting in trouble just as much. So it's not like they're the goody two-shoes kiss up always. That sometimes can translate that way, but a lot of times they kind of just play both sides nonsensically. But to them, it couldn't be more sensical, you know? All right, number 15, we almost halfway through here. People on the spectrum can really go too far with things also. Like I mentioned, the bending the rules, doesn't know when to bend them, how to bend them. This can kind of lean into that a little bit. They can just go way too far with things, especially jokes. I think I have been notorious my whole life for just going way too far with my joke, and the more that the person on the spectrum goes far with it and the more pushback they feel from everybody else, the more they think it's funny and the harder they'll push and the more inappropriate they might push and the more from everybody else they'll kind of get, but they'll the whole time think it's the funniest goddamn shit ever. And maybe it is. I mean, I thought I was funny all the time. I always think I'm funny. Just because they don't really know where the line is, because now they're like, oh, jokes, you can cross that line. But they don't understand that there still can be sometimes a line there. Number 16, in certain situations when they are asked to go outside their comfort zone, this can sometimes lead to a meltdown or a shutdown if you hit that trigger. I'm not saying that people on the spectrum can't be pushed, because quite the contrary. I think that people on the spectrum can take that push, can take that harsh critique better than almost anybody else. But there are certain barriers, there are certain boundaries that a lot of people on the spectrum have very strongly held. And the second that you try to push that down or push that in a little bit, that can cause an extreme overwhelm. This happens a lot of time at school because we're told to do something, we're required to do a specific project, put in a certain situation, there's not much you can do about it, and that's something that can really trigger somebody on the spectrum. A good example of this is like when I was younger, I had a huge problem with being sexy, and I spent my whole younger life acting and dancing, and being a female, I was asked to do that a lot, and I was very much not good at it and not comfortable with it. And that's a very common thing that when asked to do, I would sometimes have a meltdown, or that barrier would be pushed and I couldn't really handle it. So stuff like that. Number 17, I kind of touched on this in the last one, are shutdowns and meltdowns. I already have a whole video about that up, and so that will be linked probably down below, and I go way more into the specifics of that because that's just a whole huge topic. So, but that is also a huge indication. Number 18, this one more applies to people with ASD1 and maybe ASD2, mostly people with that just don't need as much assistance day to day, and that is that we're very comfortable doing things alone, if not a lot of times prefer it, especially from a young age. We don't feel weird, you know, going to the bathrooms by ourselves. We don't feel weird going to the mall by ourselves. We don't feel weird taking ourselves to a movie, doing a project by ourselves, spending alone time. There's just a lot of autonomy that can come with being on the spectrum that I think is very underseen. It's like the underdog of the autistic trait. I can't think of the name. I can't think of what to call it. And again, I understand that people with ASD3, these people do need a lot of assistance, but I think a huge significator for like ASD1 is just that strong autonomy. They're going to think what they think, they're going to like what they like, they're going to know what they know, they're going to do what they're going to do. And the only way that you can talk them out of it is if you have a real reasonable PowerPoint to show them. And you've covered yourself from all angles. Number 19. This is very small, but I think it shows a lot, but I think it's something that I've kind of noticed. And it's not true with everyone. I think this is one of those that less people are going to relate to. And that's that a lot of people on the spectrum aren't going to kind of hang around after school or after school activities because they don't understand that that's how you meet people, that that's how you make friends, that that's how you socialize. And a lot of times these people can see it as a waste of time because they have better things to do, they have more things to do, they don't understand why they would just hang around and schmooze and waste time, that small talk thing that I mentioned. But this can, I think, be a big reason as to why a lot of people on the spectrum have a lot of trouble making friends, is that they don't understand this. Number 20, not wanting to go on some trips. Now, this is not to be confused with people on the spectrum never want to travel. I love traveling. I love going on places. I'm totally fine with taking planes. Have never had any problems. But there are some very specific trip circumstances that I really, really cannot deal with and really heavily affect me. And most of those have to do with trips that are longer, trips with people that I don't know, like if I don't have anybody with me that's my family, or like somebody like my roommate who I'm just extraordinarily close to, or trips that aren't really planned or scatterly planned, or even just if the trip is to relax, I'm fucked. I don't know how to relax, and I don't know how to just be like, oh yeah, from this time, I guess we're going to eat around this time, and I guess we're going to relax now and not do anything here. Like, my brain cannot comprehend that. If the trips are routined, if they are planned, they don't even have to be like 1, 2, 3, 4. No, like I just know like on this day we're doing this one thing, on this day we're doing this one thing, and we're staying here, you know? And I'm with this safe person, then the trip is okay. But if those variables are different or shaken up or this and that, it can really stress me out and cause a lot of panic and confusion. Number 21, this kind of goes into each other, as a lot of them do. We are very specific about our daily routine. Even if that daily routine is not having one, we are still very specific about that's what we want to do. Possibly, this can even be to the point that this limits their fun, this limits their enjoyment. They miss out on a lot of things because they can very much be a slave to their routine. 22, autistic people are great with patterns. Just in general, like video games are very pattern-based, astrology is actually very pattern-based, math is very pattern-based, sorting, organizing, music, of course, is very pattern-based. I have a great sense of rhythm. Number 23 is picky eaters, and I'm sure we all know this, but there's a specific kind of picky eater that someone on the spectrum is. A lot of times, these will be textured or smell-based preferences, or, you know, I don't want my foods to touch. I think more often than not, all of my picky things when I was younger had to do with textures. And I know I've brought this up before, but I think it is a huge indication. Like, I wouldn't eat things that I would call crunchy, tasteless vegetables, basically. I don't like anything that's like pudding or whipped cream or mousse, like those textures. Also, people on the spectrum are picky eaters in the sense that they could eat the same thing every day and be fine. Like, I know that I would eat the same thing for breakfast for a few years on end, and I would look forward to it every morning. I know that there's a lot of times a lot of problems with getting people on the spectrum to have a variety in their diet, and I know I still can stick with this. Like, all I eat is like potatoes and rice, and I love it. Now, picky not in the way that this doesn't mean that people on the spectrum aren't willing to try new foods. Sometimes they might not, when they're younger, be willing to try food from parents they don't know or like homes they don't know. That's something they can be specific about. But if you take them out to a restaurant, I never had a problem with trying new kinds of food or this and that, but that doesn't mean it's going to go into my daily rotation, you know, or that I may never want to eat it again, or that I even will eat much of the meal, you know, but I'll try it, so. Number 24, people on the spectrum are often hypersensitive to noise or other physical triggers or sensations. Like, for example, the car music is up too loud, the music in the restaurant inhibits them from hearing what you're saying, you know, putting on captions on movies, not being able to hear two songs at once or two sounds at once, or, oh, because you're talking to me and the birds are chirping, I can only hear the birds, that kind of stuff. Or like a loud siren goes by and they really freak out and can't deal with it and it messes them up for quite some time after, is a huge common indication. Number 25 is something that I think is one of the most misunderstood things about autism, and that's the emotional side. People on the spectrum have trouble showing emotions, but they usually have a huge understanding of their emotional life in a very mental and cerebral way. And if you just asked them to explain themselves and gave them some time, they might be able to break down things in a much more rational and realistic point of view than you would expect. But just because they're not showing it doesn't mean that they're not feeling what's going on. And just because they're not showing out on the external that they don't understand what's going on emotionally doesn't mean that they don't have a full grasp and understanding of it on the internal. And most emotional expressions that they do display or show get incredibly misunderstood and misinterpreted. Number 26, again, these are a little bit ones that are less common or less like poignant as some of the ones in the beginning. A lot of times I find people on the spectrum to be more open to expressing themselves physically rather than emotionally or vocally. Due to the social awkwardness and the natural kind of shy nature, they may put themselves more out there through their external expression. And I think this is something that I'm even more seeing with the Gen Z generation of people on the spectrum really dressing to express themselves and dressing how they feel and being very unashamed and very confident with it. But that doesn't always mean that you're like, you don't have to be like a little bit more like me where I like to dress up and this and that. It can also just be that you just dress authentically and organically how you want to. So if you don't feel like dressing up every day, you're not going to just to make somebody happy. You're just going to wear the same t-shirt every day if that's what you feel like doing. But if what you feel like doing is wearing an insane clown outfit every day, you don't give a fuck. You're going to do that. It can just be much more authentic the way that they express themselves, the way that we dress, the way that we groom ourselves than most people. Number 27, questioning the rules that the masses have put into effect and solidly stand by and we all just, flock to. People on the spectrum, like I said, there's a lot more autonomy, there's a lot more individualistic thinking, and so they're not just going to think a certain way or see things a certain way because people told them to, because the masses told them to. Yes, on one other end of the spectrum, they can get very attached to the way that the rules were told, but usually as they get older, they can quickly understand that they are being lied to or this and that, and they can think for themselves. They'll probably go the other way very quickly and stand with how they think and form more solid opinions and stick by them more than most people. These people will more confidently go against the masses and not care as much what the masses think of them, sometimes to a fault. Number 28 is not really maturing or aging in a way that a lot of other people do. I think that a lot of people on the spectrum go through puberty in a much more roundabout way or at much more different times, or more common than not, I think much more later than most people that are neurotypical. Especially romantically and sexually, it usually doesn't happen until much later for people that are on the spectrum, if at all. I think that being aromantic or asexual can be something that's very common with being on the spectrum. During the time when kids are normally going through puberty, I've noticed that a lot of people on the spectrum can kind of struggle because they're going through the opposite, where a lot of kids are changing their minds and rebelling and being more promiscuous or this and that. People on the spectrum can lock down even harder to the rules and ideas that they hold true and have a lot of trouble progressing past them. And I see a lot of people on the spectrum kind of getting stuck, and it takes them a little bit longer to push through and break through those mindsets or opinions or rules that kind of hold them back. And this comes from that black and white thinking that can be just so hard to deprogram. It can really take a lot of effort to do that. And a lot of times the rebellion may not come until way later down the line, and also the person on the spectrum probably doesn't see the rebellion as a rebellion. Okay, so we're on to the last two signs that I wrote about. Of course, there are so many that I missed. Of course, there are so many that I haven't mentioned. I just picked 30, pulled it out of my ass because I felt like it. So this is not a full list. This is just I don't know. So number 29 and 30 kind of go into to each other, but they're just from different perspectives. So number 29 is the perspective of somebody on the outside looking into the person that might be on the spectrum. And it's that others can sometimes feel in the person that something is not right, for lack of a better term. And other people can take offense to the person on the spectrum and not really be able to pinpoint why that is. And a lot of the reason why they're feeling this kind of weird thing is due to the person's on the spectrum's social awkwardness or just natural standoffishness that can kind of come. There are people that I've suspected on the spectrum, and I think back to conversations that people have had with me about them, and they'll be like, I don't know why this person just doesn't rub me the right way. Or they'll say like, oh, I don't know, there's something off, there's something just not right. And they're really not trying to be rude a lot of times. They're just very confused. I've even had kind of people almost tell that to me too about me in a roundabout way. And number 30 is from the perspective of the person wondering if they are on the spectrum or not. And that's on the inside, you've always felt like there is something a little bit off. something a little bit different to you than everyone else that you just can't quite put your finger on. And while listening or reading a lot of these traits, you might have felt an instant breath or an instant release because you may feel like you're not as alone as you felt you were, or you may be feeling a little bit more validated right now, or you may be even shocked because I'm describing a lot of your life. And that, I think, if I was talking through this list and you're unsure if you're on the spectrum or not, again, this is not a diagnosis, but if you really felt very affected by the things that I was talking about and very related and understanding almost all the points that I'm saying and where I'm coming from, that might be a big indication that you may possibly be on the spectrum, or at least should further look into a possible diagnosis. Really, when I found out about autism, it felt like the missing puzzle piece to my life, and it was something that I can think of throughout so many other times in my life that I was like, there's something here, and I'm missing it, and I wish I knew what it was, but I can't quite put my finger on it right now, and when I know, it'll be huge, but for until then, I don't know. You know, it's just this weird feeling that there's something else going on. Somebody very, very kind that watches my channel wrote me an amazingly sweet email that meant so much to me, and they kind of said that they had the sensation when they were watching my videos of when they were hearing me talking about autism or just hearing me talking about life in general or things. They explained how they kind of had this epiphany of, we both have it, whatever it is. You know, it's kind of that feeling. But yes, those are my 30 signs of possibly being on the autism spectrum. And before I go, I would like to talk about a company of the eyelashes that I've been wearing throughout this whole video. Their name is BLUSHBERRY Beauty, and they sell magnetic eyelashes. I've been absolutely obsessed with wearing false eyelashes recently. I've worn them in like all of my videos, and I have never worn eyelashes that are this comfortable. And I've been genuinely wanting to try magnetic lashes for a long time. So it was very exciting when they reached out to me, and they offer exclusively vegan and cruelty-free stuff, and so that's a huge important plus to me because I only use vegan cruelty-free products. So I wear contacts, and eyelashes really dry the crap out of my eyes, and these are the most comfortable lashes I've ever had on. They even are silkier. There was so much more ease to applying them, and I think the main thing that really sets these lashes apart from the glue lashes, which you'd think it's the ease of applying with a magnet and this and that, but to me, it's more about how much longer I can wear them. I can only wear other lashes for a few hours and then I want to claw my eyes out. But I've worn these for the whole day so far, and I do not feel like I'm wearing eyelashes at all. And I cannot express to you how huge that is. This is the Queen Bee style. I did have a little bit of problems with the inner corners. That's more of my user error. So they are something that I think the more you use them, honestly, the more they'll shape to your eyes, because they can be a little bit stiff when you first get them, but I think it's almost good that you can kind of break them in like leather shoes because you can get 40 plus uses out of them. So it's unlike most lashes where the more you use them, the more they'll fit and shape to your eye. So yes, again, this is BLUSHBERRY Beauty. They gave me the liner and the Queen Bee lashes. If you want to check them out, the links will be down below. This may sound really silly, but it meant a lot to me that they allowed me to have their product when I'm an autism channel and not a beauty related channel, because I think that a lot of brands and companies can be very scared to associate themselves, I feel like, with autism. Even in real life, people are scared to say the word to me, which can be very weird, and I really want it to be something that's much more normalized. I really want autism to be more integrated and more casual and comfortable to be talked about in that way. It really does mean a lot to me. So yes, I have a discount code if you want to check that out down below, and I have links to those lashes and everything. And a big thank you again to BLUSHBERRY Beauty. So yes, that is my whole video today. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you have some signs of autism that, you know, I might have missed out on, because I definitely missed out on some for sure, just leave them down below in the comments, and get the conversation going, because I think that will also be really helpful for people that are trying to figure out if they want to move forward with their with a possible diagnosis or not. And again, my final thing that I want to say is autism is not something to be ashamed about. It's not, so there's nothing wrong with you. It's not good or bad. It just is, and there are a lot more hidden strengths to autism than a lot of people think. Hopefully this gave some people validation, possibly. I always appreciate all you guys' comments and support on my channel. This community means so much to me. You have no idea how much I appreciate your messages, how much I appreciate your support. I love you guys so much, and I'll be talking to you guys in my next video. Bye.